I'll leave the dog in here, shall I?
Right.
Yes.
Okay. So I will now mute you all, and then I'll explain how we do this, and we'll go from there. Right, okay, good evening and welcome to this, hopefully the last lockdown lecture. So if you put, those I can see of you, if you could put your thumb up, if you can A, see the presentation, and B, hear me, okay? Yeah, we're good to go, all right. So this is a guide to doubling. Two very famous backgammon players on the introductory slide on the left. The inventor of the Jacobi rule, Oswald Jacobi, famous bridge player, and on the right, the original playboy, Hugh Hefner. Notice he's got a pint, and Mr. Jacobi has a packet of Marlborough, which can give you an idea of when the photo was taken. So, oh, that doesn't work. Okay, no, that's fine. So, thank you all for your donations to REACT. REACT stands for Rapid Effective Assessment for Children with Potentially Terminal Illnesses, which is a local charity to me here in Sheen. So far, we've raised about 2,500, and we'll raise another 1,000 tonight, hopefully. And they have struggled during the pandemic, obviously, because they haven't been able to run the events they normally run. So the money that we've raised through these events has been very gratefully received. Anyone who hasn't donated and still wishes to do so, the link is at the bottom. This presentation will be sent out, and I'll just explain all of that in a minute. I know a lot of you. Let me just check what's happened in the chat. So I've got someone saying it's very blurred, so it's, I don't know who that is from, but hopefully it isn't. So let me know if it does. So I've been around for a long time. I've played backgammon for a long time. I was a backgammon columnist for 22 years, and now my backgammon column appears in the Times every Friday. Ninth book, 9 books published, 10th to come, which might be based on this presentation, the next one. So we will see. And unlike most people, I think I've been incredibly busy during lockdown, playing, analysing, teaching, commentating, and writing. So, and there is my website at the bottom. There is more educational material on there, should you wish, at the end of the day, if you're not too tired to go again. Hang on, I've got, all right, something's just come through on chat. Let me just check something, please, for a minute. I'm going to stop the share. I'm going to share the screen. I'm just going to close PowerPoint for a minute and then start again. So hold on. Apologies for the technical mishap. Let's close that down. Okay. Quit, and then fire it up again. There should now only be one option in my share when I do the share from Zoom. Share screen, right. Slideshow. So hopefully that is now clear. And again, just let me know via chat if it isn't. So we've done the REACT bit, we've done the me bit. Oh, some opening remarks. Right, so everyone says that's good, that's fine. So we've got a large audience, you've all got very different knowledge levels. This is the most complex backgammon topic you can have. And in 60 to 90 minutes, I cannot possibly teach you everything I know about doubling or that has already been written about. So this is a framework on which to build. The follow-up is entirely up to you. So you can listen to this presentation and never look at it again. That's fine. But realistically, there's a huge amount of information coming your way over the next hour or so, and you'll probably need to go through the presentation and or the video again. So that's up to you, but I will provide you with the PowerPoint of the presentation. I will provide you with the link to the recording. Just for fun, there are 4 worksheets, sorry, 3 worksheets with 4 problems each. So there are 12 problems for you to work through and the solution. So again, that's up to you. And there's some other stuff coming. Now, because this is the last lecture, what I've decided to do is on Google Drive, I am going to put all of the lectures from this year in a single folder. So you get the backgame lecture, the match play lecture, and this one. I've also included 2 other lectures which have not been generally available. The first one is called How Difficult is Backgammon? Pretty much self-explanatory. And the other one is the story of backgammon. So that's a pictorial, largely pictorial view of the history of the game. There's no backgammon, complex backgammon in it. It's just a little bit of fun. It explains what happened to Lord Lucan, if you're interested in that. And it's just very light-hearted. Now, in the same folder, I've also put some other stuff. So I've put Andy Bell's 4 programs called High Stakes on the 2005 World Backgammon Championship, which are really worth watching. Highly recommended. And I've also put the 1-hour documentary made in 1986 about the 1985 World Championships. And again, it's a lovely bit of history. So you can download all of this stuff, make use of it. So it's out there for the backgammon community. I'll reiterate the point I made this last time. There is no silver bullet. You will not walk away from here as a genius in doubling. What you will walk away with, hopefully, is more knowledge and the ability to have a plan to become even better at doubling than you are today. So no silver bullet, sorry about that one. And I use this slide in all the presentations as well. If you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough, from Mr. Einstein. The problem is that I can explain this at very many different levels, and I've gone away from trying to do an in-depth discussion of equity, which will send everybody to sleep. So you could add another level onto this, but that would be, I think, too much for what is a general presentation. I hope I can explain it relatively simply, but we'll see how we go. So let's go on to the next one. So we're going to light-hearted look just quickly at the history of doubling because it's relevant to what has happened to doubling over the period of time that it has existed. So let's just pop to the next slide. The history of doubling. Backgammon has been around for 5,000 years, or the board has. Modern backgammon, where you play the doublet where you play a double 4 times, where there is such a thing as a backgammon, and then even the name backgammon originated somewhere at the start of the 1600s. So in real terms, it's 400 years old, roughly, the game as we know it. Doubling didn't exist until 1926. It was thought for many years that it originated in the gentlemen's clubs of New York or Boston, and no one actually knew. And then someone found this Harper's Bazaar article from October 1931, which clearly, and it was written by an American who clearly demonstrated that actually the idea of doubling originated in France on the Playboy circuit. There's an article, that Harper's Bazaar article is included in the material that I will send out tomorrow, so you're welcome to have a little read of that. You can find out where it came from. Basically, doubling started with automatic doubling, so you roll the same number at the start of the game, and then if you double the stakes, and then some genius decided, well, if you can double at the start of the game, why can't you double in the middle of the game? And it's relevant that all of this happened in the mid-1920s, at the height of the roaring 20s, if you like. So backgammon suffered from two things. You couldn't bet enough money on it, and some of the games were very long and tedious. And the idea of doubling solved both of those problems in an instant. And I think without the advent of doubling, backgammon would not be the game that it is today. So the first game involving doubling is reputed to have been played in the Travellers Club in Paris between the Grand Duke Dmitry of Russia and Axel de Wischfield of Denmark. No clear proof of that, but again, the article is pretty good, and it's the nearest we've got to a definitive start to doubling. The doubling cube, as we know it, didn't appear till 1930. So that little red circle there shows the very first doubling cube. It's actually an advert for a backgammon board for Christmas. So no one knows who invented the doubling cube. Before doubling, you had various things. So you had backgammon matches. So these are Bakelite matches. Each color denotes a different value. There's half a dozen sets of these in the world knocking around. So I managed to buy these on eBay in an auction from an Austrian ski resort at 3 o'clock in the morning. And even then, they cost me about $300. So, but they're worth a lot more than that today. Secondly, for a very brief period, there was a dial at the side of the board, and I'll show you that in action in a minute. So this is a Bakelite dial, and I got this one on eBay for $10. I'm only aware of one other in the world. It's not clear how it was used, because actually it was fixed to the side of the board, so ownership would have been a difficult thing to illustrate. But again, no one knows. Then, of course, we've got the doubling cube, and for all of you guys who like high rollers, it's essential to have a cube that goes up to 4,096. So I've played backgammon for 40 years, and in that time I've had 364 cubes. So it doesn't often get that high. So this is Douglas Fairbanks Jr. and Joan Crawford, taken somewhere between 1926 and 1930. You can see the dial at the side of the board. I'll see if just a little photo shoot. So yeah, they existed, they played, and people began to write books that included information on doubling around about 1927, 1928. This is a quote from Georges Mabardi in the original Backgammon to Win. So if two absolutely perfect players engaged in a match, there would never be an accepted double. So basically, what was invented, nobody understood. So it was there really as a gambling element. Nobody understood the mathematics. Nobody wrote down the mathematics, the simple arithmetic of doubling. For 44 years after it was invented, nobody bothered with diagrams of pip counts. And backgammon matches, games, were not recorded until 1973. So although the game is very old, it's actually very young. And actually did a step change in 1992 with the advent of neural net computers, or bots as we know them. So that's a little bit of the history. It'd be nice to know a bit more, but we don't. So research goes on. I keep looking at copies of London Illustrated News and so on and so forth, but so far no more information on the origins. But Bill Davis and Chicago Point, if you want to go and read a bit more, go on the Chicago Point website. All his research is still there. So let's briefly look at the known universe. So doubling theory. Everyone, I'm assuming on the call, on the lecture this evening, knows all this stuff. So basic doubling theory, scenario 1, player A doubles player B in 4 games. Player B drops, so player B's net score is -4. Player A, scenario 2, doubles again in 4 games, but this time B accepts. He goes on to lose 3, but wins 1. So his net score is -4, which leads you to the fundamental simple piece of arithmetic that underpins everything that we do with the doubling cube. To accept a double, you need a 25% chance of winning the game. you can play any game with doubling. I played golf with a doubling cube, Scrabble with a doubling cube, and chess with a doubling cube in my time, but largely, of course, backgammon. But the theory applies to any game, so you can use it in any game. And then, of course, we get the first change to the, whoops, sorry. So there we go. But actually, you don't need 25% chance to take a cube, because provided there is time to redouble, then owning the cube is generally reckoned to be worth 2 to 3%. So it means the take point for most doubles, assuming no gammons for the time being, is 22 to 23% and not 25%, because owning the cube is an immensely powerful thing to do in backgammon. So in simple terms, ask yourself this: if I had this position repeatedly, would I expect to win between 1 in 4 and 1 in 5 times? If yes, then you have a take. How do you know if you're going to win between 1 in 4 and 1 in 5 times? Well, that's the subject of this lecture, fundamentally. By the way, there will be time for questions at the end, but obviously I'm not going to cope with questions as we go through. Don't forget, as I've just said, there's a big difference between doubling and redoubling, because when you double, you're merely exercising your right to increase the stakes. Your opponent can do exactly the same. When you redouble, you give your opponent access to something to which he previously had no access. So the logic says you need to be slightly stronger to redouble than to offer an initial double. And then we get to what I call the doubling spectrum. So you start the game, you reach 50%. Obviously, no one's going to double very early, although in fact we're going to see some very early doubles a little bit later on. Most of the time, if there is no action, there is no double, and if someone did double, it would be a take. You then get the key element of any backgammon game, which is the position where it's both a double and a take, a correct double and a correct take, and that is known as the doubling window. If you miss the doubling window, you get to double pass. So if you double, your opponent will pass and you'll move on to a new game. Most of the things we're going to talk about this evening are in the doubling window category. The bit in red at the end is too good to double and pass. So you're so good that actually you should play on for a gammon. But in this lecture, we're going to talk about money backgammon. The match play lecture dealt with match play. So in money backgammon, there's a thing called the Jacobi rule, which basically says if the cube has not been turned, you can't win a gammon, which stops people playing on very one-sided games in order to secure a gammon. I've observed two things during the course of watching and playing a lot of backgammon for the last year in lockdown. The two biggest errors I see every day is, one, people don't take enough time to make their decisions because actually they're very difficult. And secondly, lots of people cash when in fact they're too good to double. As I say, that only happens in matches. So visually, what we've got here, backgammon's a strange game in so much as if you play rugby, to score a try, you have to get from the halfway line to the touchdown area. Same for American football. In backgammon, you only have to threaten to get to the try line to actually win the game. So the doubling window there opens at 50% and runs to 77%. I'm ignoring gammons for the time being. And actually, most of the action occurs in the red zone. So somewhere between 66 and 77% is where most doubles are given. Again, ignore match play and ignore gammons for the moment. So you want to give your opponent a difficult decision. You do not wish to give him a trivial decision. Making people's lives hard at backgammon is what you're trying to do. So the doubling window is that range of percentages between which the correct action is double and take. In a money game, we've just seen it's from 50 to 77%. In match play, and again, I'm not going to do this evening, we've done it already in the match play lecture, the size of the window is dictated by the score. And the window can be very narrow or actually non-existent. And when you're trailing in a match, you can sometimes double when you're not even the favourite. So go and watch the backgame lecture if you want to understand those last two statements. And then we come to gammons. So life would be simple, but for gammons and backgammons. Most middle game positions have an underlying gammon percentage of around 20%. So you cannot ignore gammons. Obviously, there are half a dozen different middle game types, and each of those have different underlying gammon percentages. There's long been an argument as to how many games would finish in gammons if played to a conclusion, somewhere between 20 and 25%, but that 20% is the figure to use for the time being. So if you change a gammon, if you change a loss to a gammon loss, so the cube is on 2 and you get gammoned, you lose 4, so you've lost 2 additional points. But if you change a loss to a win, you go from -2 to +2, so you gain 4 points. Therefore, for every gammon you lose, you need to win an extra half game. Let's put that in English. If your opponent wins a gammon 10% of the time, you need 10/2 or 5% extra wins to take a double. So instead of having to win 1 in 4 games, you're potentially having to win closer to 1 in 3 games if the gammon threat is there. And most of the time when you're doubled, you are the person who's going to lose a higher percentage of gammons. So we've gone from 1 in 4 to 1 in 3, but you have to temper that depending on the position in front of you. But please don't forget gammons when taking or dropping. General points: taking and dropping is a reactive decision because it is your opponent who initiates the action. You have to make a decision. Doubling or redoubling is a proactive decision because you initiate the action and it is consequentially more difficult. And in theory, there's no difference between the value of the cube, and if you're affected by the value of the cube, you are playing for too much money. So as a side point, my theory of backgammon and money was always, if you cannot write a check for 100 times the nominal amount per point you are playing for and sleep easily, you are playing for too much money. And in a chouette of 4 or 5 people, you need to be able to write a check for 200 times the nominal stake. So a useful guideline. So most doubling taking decisions are based on a mixture of pattern recognition and calculation. The vast majority are made on pattern recognition, which will be good news for most of the non-mathematicians amongst you. You will make many checker plays during a single game of backgammon. You will make only 1 or 2 decisive doubling decisions, where the cube actually changes hands. So, therefore, please take your time. So Moshe's rule is that you should never, ever make a doubling decision without a minimum of 12 seconds thought. 12 seconds might not seem a lot, but it's a lot more than I've seen some decisions being made in over the course of the last year. So slow down. Yeah, time and again, when coaching, teaching, just slow down and you will make much better decisions. The use of time is not a topic for tonight, but we're all playing timed backgammon nowadays, whether it's online or in matches in clubs. That's not always true, but increasingly clocks will be in use, so you need to learn to manage your time. So now to Mr. McGreal. Oops, hang on, there we go. So McGreal, in his book in 1976, said good checker play will never compensate for serious errors of judgment in doubling. That statement was made, whatever it is, 45 years ago. It's still true today. For those of you who are aware of performance ratings, which is a measure of how good you are, everybody has 2 performance ratings, one for cube handling and one for checker play. And the combination of the 2 gives you your overall performance rating. there is not a single player in the world who has a lower PR for doubling than he does for checker play, and lower is better in PR terms. So checker play is fine. We can all get very good at checker play. Judgment in doubling is very, very difficult. So that's the preamble. Right, so I've split this into two halves. So firstly, science. So you're going to have to cope with some arithmetic for the next few minutes. And then art. So all the pattern recognition stuff and so on will come later. So while you're still sharp and alert, I'm going to deal with the arithmetic. So for the last year, you have been given the pip count in virtually every game that you've played. When you go back to live gammon, you're not going to get a board that gives you the pip count. So you need to be able to count pips, and you need to be able to count it fairly quickly. Practice makes perfect. I know a lot of people who aren't very good at arithmetic, but can still count a backgammon race. So knowing who is ahead in the race is a fundamental part of any backgammon game. So when do you double in a race? Initially now we're dealing with no contact between the two armies. It's a simple race to the finish. For me, there are 4 levels of being able to use the doubling cube in a race. So as an absolute minimum, you use a 10% guideline. So level 1, you're 10% ahead, you can double. If you're still 10% behind, you can take. That has to be the absolute minimum that anybody ever uses. What is used by probably the majority of casual players, even if they don't sometimes recognize it, is the 8, 9, 12 rule. So this is level 2. You need to be 8% ahead to double, 9% ahead to redouble, and you can take until you are 12% behind, 8, 9, 12. So again, obviously you can calculate 10 and then hopefully work out what 8, 9, and 12 are if you're not that good at arithmetic. At an expert level, you need to understand Jeff Ward's formula and Trice's rule of 62, which I am going to cover briefly. And I would expect an expert level to have rudimentary knowledge of match equities, which again is not in the scope of tonight. At a world-class level, and this is level 4, to me, you have to understand and use effective pip counts, learn the rest of Trice's formulae, use Reichhardt's formula, and I'll talk about that in a minute, and full understanding application of match equity charts and formulae. And no more than 2% of the world's backgammon players, if that, use world-class level arithmetic to play the game. And I'm going to touch for about 30 seconds on world-class level, but then I'm going to tell you to go away and read the detail. So another part of the handouts from tonight is a monograph called Backgammon Races, which I have built over the years. It exists on my website. It will exist in the folder that I will point you to tomorrow. It is 13 pages of detail on this stuff. So if that sounds frightening, don't bother. If you're interested, read it and then start to use it. So here's a simple race. Oh, hang on, there's more people in the waiting room, so I'll just better put them in if I can let them in. Oops, no, I'm failing to let people in. Oh, hang on a minute, sorry, it won't be a moment. Hang on. No, I can't get at them, so they'll have to. If you'll excuse me, I'm going to drop out of sharing just for a minute, let a couple of people in, and then come back. So let me do this. So can I do this? Right, that will be the last ones in. Right, then we'll go back to screen sharing and play from the current slide. Okay, so I've leapt ahead by mistake. So here's a basic race. Red's pip count is 100. White's pip count is 111. In all of these diagrams, the pip count are given at the bottom and top of the bar in red. So red is 100, White is 111. So this is a classic doubling position. 10% of 100, strangely enough, is 10. So this is good enough both to double and redouble, but white is still only 11% behind, because 11 is obviously 11% of 100. So if we look at the solution, this is double, redouble, and take. So that is a straightforward race. We have made no allowance for distribution or anything else in this. So it's a very simplistic formula, but it works most of the time, the 8, 9, 12. But a guy called Jeff Ward in 1975 wrote a book called The Doubling Cube Volume 1, which was about 20 years ahead of its time. And he recognized that you need to take account of distribution. And he basically created a formula based on the difference between the leader's pip count and the trailer's pip count, but not just a pure pip count, an adjusted pip count. So what does Ward's for? How do you calculate an adjusted pip count? This is how you do it. It might look tricky. It's not that difficult. So you start with the base pip count. You add 2 for each additional checker over the number of checkers that your opponent has. That deals with checkers board off. You add 2 for each checker over 2 on the 1 point, 1 for each checker over 2 on the 2 point, and 0.5 for each checker outside the home board. As it says here, gaps are treated subjectively. So if you've got lots of checkers on the 6 point and an empty 3 point, that's fine, because the 3s will be played usefully. If you have an empty 4 point, that is a very bad gap, because your 4s will have to be played from the 6 and the 5 point, and that will generate inefficiency. So I'm not going to go any deeper into that. But Jeff created the formula or the method, and then created a set of criteria for when you double and take. And that was proved later on to be slightly inaccurate by a guy called Walter Trice. Walter was a backgammon theoretician. You'll see in a minute his book, Backgammon Boot Camp, which should be in everybody's library. Walter was a fantastic theoretician. Sadly, he left us early. He did a 100-mile charity bike ride when he was just past 60, I think. He wasn't as fit as he should have been, and he died of a heart attack the next day. So that was not great. We lost a very great backgammon theoretician at that point. So Trice's formula 62 is very simple if you're good at arithmetic. Now, again, if you're not good at arithmetic, then you go 8, 9, 12. And if you're hopeless at arithmetic, you just use the 10%. So you have to calculate what's called the point of last take. So you take the leader's adjusted pip count, and there's a rule that if it's less than 62, you subtract 5, divide by 7 and round down. If it's greater than 62, you divide by 10 and add 1. And if it's precisely 79 or 89, you add another 1. Okay, that all sounds very complicated. If you play backgammon a lot, it's actually really easy to use, provided you have the basic arithmetic skills. And then the rule is quite simple. The leader can double when the trailer is within 3 pips of the last take. He can redouble when the trailer is within 2 pips of the last take. So again, a difference between doubling and redoubling. And that point of last take equates to roughly 23% winning chances, because we've already seen that if you own the cube and have time to use it, you only need 23% winning chances to take it. For those of you interested in arithmetic, for every pip that you are above the point of last take, you lose approximately 1.5% game winning chances, something that we had to use in a training session last week for the UK team. So I won't say any more than that, but it's a useful reference point. So let's see this thing in action. Red's pip count is 46, white's pip count is 44. So now let's do the adjusted pip count. So red's pip count, the only change you have to make is to add 2 for the extra checker on the third checker on the ace point. So that makes it 48. If you His threes are not a problem because they'll be played 6-3, so the gap doesn't count. Now look at white. White's basic pip count is 44, but he's going to add four pips for the fact that he's got 15 checkers and red has got 13. He's going to add 6 pips for the 3 extra checkers on the ace point, 1 pip for the extra checker on the 2 point, and 0.5 pips for the checker on the 8 point. Okay, so his ward count is 55. Whoops, let's just go back. So we've now got the 2 adjusted pip counts. We calculate the point of last take. 48 is less than 62, so we subtract 5, giving 43, divide by 7, which gives 6, add that to the base count. So the point of last take is 54. Therefore, red should double because he's in the window, but white should drop despite the fact that he's actually ahead in the base pip count. So the correct action is double and drop. So if you do that on the 10%, you'll get it completely wrong. So it shows how important distribution is. And the more sophisticated formulae pay more and more attention to the distribution. Now I'm going to tell you what an effective pip count is, and then I'm going to leave you the rest. So wastage is the average number of pips wasted by the roller in bearing off from a given position. So if you have 1 checker on your ace point and you roll double 6, you've just wasted 23 pips because you only needed 1. The effective pip count is your actual pip count plus your wastage. So here is the optimal structure when bearing in. So red structure, 7 on the 6 point, 5 on the 5 point, and 3 on the 4 point, is the structure that wastes least pips. So the pip count is 79. On average, red will roll 86 pips and a little bit before, while he's bearing off those checkers. It's obviously, you'd have to do it thousands of times for that average to come out. But that is the optimal bearing position. So you all know to put, when you're bearing in, to put lots of checkers on the high points. That just proves the point. If you're a user of Extreme Gammon, what you will find is Extreme Gammon gives you the 2 pip counts. So EPC, it will only give you them once you have borne in all the checkers into the inner board. So you'll see there 2 effective pip counts ringed. And then there's a whole series of formulae which Trice derived to tell you what to do with those effective pip counts, and that goes beyond the bounds of tonight. So please read the paper to find out more. The last thing I'm going to mention in the arithmetic session, the science section, is Roberti's addition method. So this is something that Bill put in his original book, Advanced Backgammon, years ago. So this is what's called a 3-roll position. Red will bear off in 3 rolls, white will bear off 3 rolls. We'll see in a minute that that is actually a double and a drop, but there is 1 roll that will cost red a whole roll. So if he rolls 3-2, he won't take off any checkers, and he'll still be in a 3-roll situation. Each roll of the dice happens 5.5% of the time. So red's winning chances are just diminished by 5.5%, which gives white a take in this position. So Roberti's addition method is fundamentally seeking out extra winning chances that you may not have observed in the first instance. So you'll be glad to know that is the end of the science and the arithmetic, and we'll move on now to reference positions. What's a reference position? It's a position where you know the correct cube action for both players. You cannot play backgammon by calculating everything over the board. From first principles, each game would take a month. So even though you may not realize it, you use reference positions every time you play backgammon. So what you do is you look at the position in front of you, you call up from your personal library, i.e. your brain, your nearest known reference position, adjust for the differences and make your decision. Now, since 1992, you can actually ask a computer the answer to any position, and that position, we started with TD Gammon, we went on to Jellyfish, then Snowy, and now Extreme Gammon. How do you calculate whether a position is a double or a take? Well, you ask the computer to roll it out 50,000 times while you have a good dinner, a bottle of wine, and then some sleep. But we can rely on XG to provide the right answer, the vast majority of the time. So I'm going to show you two types of rollout. There's one for doubles and there's one for checker play. So here is a typical rollout. It lists the best action from top to bottom. So in this position, no double is the best play. Double take comes next, and then double pass comes after that. However, you are playing a human being, and human beings make mistakes. So XG very kindly gives you a figure that says if 10% of people would drop your double by mistake, then actually it's a good double. So this gets used more often than you would think. It's really a method of understanding rollout. The second type of rollout is for a checker play. This is much easier. It lists the best move in order from top to bottom. Anything in black is fine. Anything in green is what is known as an error. And anything in red is what's known as a blunder. Everybody makes errors every time they play backgammon. You cannot avoid it. You can play a perfect hand of bridge, a nigh on perfect game of chess. You cannot play a perfect game of backgammon. It is too difficult, sadly. So an error is defined as an equity difference. And again, I'm not going to go into equity calculations of 0.03, and a blunder is 0.08. Okay. If you can avoid blunders, you are a very, very good player. If you're playing to a PR of something like 3.5, which is world class and a bit, then you will be making no more than 1 or 2 blunders in a 7-point match and 3 blunders and an 11-point match. And that is incredibly difficult to do. So I'm not, we could have a whole lesson on XG and we're not going to do that. So let's look at reference positions. This is probably the first reference position, or one of the first reference positions that you're ever taught. Red is on roll. It's the last roll of the game. Should red double, should white take. Now, again, you're going to see a lot of backgammon positions in the next 30 to 40 minutes. You are coming to them cold, and that is incredibly difficult. So don't worry if you don't get the answers right. And given the speed at which I'm going to have to talk, you probably won't have time to do the necessary calculations. So I reiterate that having listened to this lecture and looked at the presentation, you really need to go through it again after the event. So first reference position, red is on roll. He will win unless he rolls any one except double one, which will still win. Therefore, he has 26 winning rolls and 10 losing rolls. You need 25% chance to take a double. 25% of 36 possible rolls is 9. Therefore, red should double and white should take. Now, for each of these positions from here on in, you're going to get the rollout. Sorry. All right. So that rollout gives you the answer. So red will win 72% of the time. White will win 27% of the time. 27 is above 25. So it is a double and a take. Very clear, very straightforward. Second reference position is, we've made reference to, this is a 3-roll position. If neither side rolls a double, then red will be off in 3 rolls and white will be off in 3 rolls. So white needs to roll a double to win. He's got 2 rolls to do it. Has he got enough time? Well, actually, the answer is no. Really? Okay. All right, so I've just been told there's a block across the screen asking people to unmute. So let me just come out of here. All right. Okay. So let me just, if you can bung in chat if you're getting a block across the screen. Let me just see if we can. Okay. It can be down to individuals' use. All right, thank you. No block. All right, we're good. Okay, so again, it could be just one or two individual users. So thank you for that. We'll come back to here. Okay, so this is a 3-role position. It is known to be double and pass. If I added 2 checkers to each player, I hope you would know that it is a double and a take. And if I added 4 checkers to each player, I hope you would know that it is a double, but not a redouble and a take. So you build up your reference positions over time. These are 2 of the simplest that I would expect everybody to know. And again, you're not going to calculate this overboard. You can't do that. You have to learn it. So part of your backgammon skill is your ability to learn and store away reference positions. So let me just check the chat again. No, okay, we're good. Fine. Right. So this is double and pass. So you use this information when you make doubling decisions. But then we rapidly move on to having rather more checkers on the board. So now we've got all the checkers on the board, and this is a holding game reference position. Now, normally I'd have a discussion as to whether this is a double or a take, but I can't do that online with so many people listening, so I'm afraid I have to give you the answers. So white has 2 ways to win this position, and in essence, he can either catch up in the race or he can hit a shot, because red has got to get 4, 6, 9 checkers past white's anchor on the 5 point before he's home free. And that takes a considerable amount of time and effort. But is it a double even? If double, should white take? So this is one of the positions that you learn, and I'll tell you how you're going to learn all of these very shortly. So I know that in this position, that if red is 20 pips ahead, he should double, and white can take until he is 50 pips behind, always assuming that white's checkers are all in play. That is a very, very big window. Yeah. But again, this type of position repeats countless times. So you have to know that, because you cannot calculate it from first principles. So here you see the answer. It's a double, but it's a very, very clear take. All right. So best choice, double take. And let's just reiterate that, double and take. But what if I change it? So here we had, now we've got the same position, but the race is shorter because red's pip count is 92, not 107. And crucially, his bar point has been filled in. So both those improvements are good for red. Are they good enough that it changes the answer? So for example, if now red rolls 6-5, he can clear his midpoint, which he couldn't do in the previous example. So now it's changed, and this is double and pass. And the way you learn with reference positions is to take any one position, find out the answer, and then tweak it and see what difference tweaking it makes. So you might only make a 1 pip change in some circumstances, and that is enough to change the answer. So you have to do the hard work. Now, luckily, I'm going to explain that someone's done most of the hard work for you shortly. So this is double and drop. What about a blitz reference? So I'm just going to cover a couple of likely scenarios. So this is an early double 5. White has opened with 4-3. Red has rolled double 5 and made the ace point and 3 point, and white has stayed out. Is this a double? Is it a take? So for years, no one knew the answer to this until the computers came along. But now we know. It is a double and it is a take. So you cannot calculate that. You have to learn it. It's the only way to do it. Double and take. And if you're a serious player, you will know the answer to the double and take after all the possible opening rolls, followed by a double 5 and a double 4 and a double 3 and a double 2. So there is no shortcut. Bad news. How about prime versus prime? So here, white is on the bar. Red has got 6, 12. He can play 17 pips before his board crashes, but he's still got 2 checkers to release. is it a double? Is it a take? And again, you cannot possibly calculate that over the board. So you have to learn it. And what we learn is it's nowhere near a double, and it's a very easy take. If red rolls 1-6 very shortly, it will become double and pass. But he's better off waiting to roll the 6 than he is doubling and then hoping to roll the 6. Okay. So notice the best choice thing comes in here. If you think your opponent or 12% of your opponents would drop, it could be a double. There are lots of positions that are technically not a double, which in practice are very clear doubles, because again, human beings make mistakes. And the more complex position, the more likely you are to make a mistake. This is no double and take. Everyone should know this one as well, because it occurs many, 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 many times. Red has a closed board. He's hit a checker late on. White has got 5 checkers born off. Is it a double? Is it a take? To which the answer is, it's a redouble and it's just a take. Right? But if those 3 checkers on White's ace point were on his 4 point and he had a gap, it would be a very big pass. So again, this is a reference position. So if your opponent has taken off 5 less checkers than you, you're likely to have a redouble. If White had taken 6 checkers off rather than 5, it's a very different equation. And again, you just have to learn it. Sorry, redouble and take. How about something like this? So red has hit a late shot, but now it's not so clear. White has only got 3 checkers off. And again, partly you do this on feel. You can do it sometimes with a little bit of calculation. Most experts would know that if you have 3 checkers off and you get closed out, you've still got 15% winning chance, 10% winning chances. If you've got 4 checkers off, 3 checkers is 15, 4 checkers is 20%. So there are little things that you keep in the back of your mind that you use from time to time. That's the wrong way. Correct action, redouble and take. This one is more complex because red has, even after he closes out white, white still has winning chances, but it's just a redouble and it's just a pass. So no one could be forgiven for making the wrong decisions here. But if you've seen the position often enough and this type of position often enough, you're more likely to make the right decision. Note that this assumes perfect play by both players. All right. So red should not slot the bar here. And if he does slot the bar, that increases white's winning chances. So if you think your opponent's going to misplay a position, that gives you added winning chances. So not only have you got technically mathematical decisions to make, you've got to evaluate your opponent as well. Now, all of the way to learn this stuff, unfortunately, is to read it, study it, and then read it again, and then study it again. There are 4 books that will give you vast amounts of knowledge that you basically have to know. Cube Like a Boss by Mark Brockman-Olson. It's not a gripping read, but it's absolutely fantastic in terms of information. Backgammon Bootcamp by Walter Trice, and then the 2 encyclopedias from Kit Woolsey, volumes 1 and 2. Remarkably, in the modern age, the proofs to volume 1 have been lost, and at the moment they're not planning to reprint it, so you have to find a copy on eBay or in a second-hand bookshop. But it's like gold dust. It is so worth having if you're a serious backgammon player. So those 4 books are essential reading. There have only ever been 6 books written only about the doubling cube. These are the 4 that are worth reading. The other 2 by Peter Bell and Gabby Horowitz should be ignored and destroyed, preferably, because they are so wrong, it's unbelievable. So these 4 books should be in everybody's library. So that's reference positions, but we now have 3 tools that also assist making decisions. There is PRAT. PRAT stands for position, race, and threat. So position, who's got the better static elements, like the number of homeboard points? Have you got a prime, a potential prime? Are your checkers well connected? Do you have an anchor? So that's, secondly, who leads in the pip count? Well, that's very straightforward. And thirdly, are you threatening to improve your position by making new points, hitting a block, bringing your last checker home safely. How volatile is the position? Yeah, we'll discuss, give you a definition of that in a minute. So if you're ahead better in two of the three main elements, you should at least be considering doubling. If you're behind in all three, you've probably got a pass. Right? But there are no, it's not a hard and fast rule. This is a tool to assist you, right? So use it and then think about it. And I'll show you an exception to the rule, of course, in a moment or two. What's a market losing sequence? Is one where after your roll, followed by your opponent's roll, he will no longer be able to accept the double. So it'll have gone from double take to double pass. And you try to avoid those situations if possible. And a volatile position is one where there is a large number of immediate market losing sequences. There's a second part to Pratt, which I'm not going to go into, which is part of the psychology of the game, an evaluation of your opponent. And in a match, the match score dominates most of your thinking. So here's a shades of grey thing. So I said that there are no, it's not black and white, can never be black and white. Here, red leads in the race by 38 pips. He's got a better home board by 2 points to 1. He's got threats to make points on white's head or make the 5 point or something like that. So you would think this is double and pass, but actually it's not even a double and a take. This is actually taken from a Roehampton training session yesterday. So this was a surprising result, but white has a lot of ways to win the game. So it's really, I'm not going to discuss the position in depth, but be aware that Pratt is a guide, it's not an answer. Then you get Wolsey's law of doubling. So this is the second tool. So if I were doubled in my opponent's position, is it a take? Yes, I'm absolutely sure it's a take. No, I'm absolutely sure it's a pass. And C, I'm not 100% sure. If the answer is C, it's always correct to double. Wolsey formulated this rule because basically he found he was winning 1 point all the time instead of winning 2s and 4s. So by applying this rule, he won a shed load more gammons and a shed load more games with the cube on 2. He probably lost more as well, but overall he came out ahead. So Wolsey's law of doubling is very, very useful. So let's look at a practical example. You use Wolsey's law when the position is very complex. So this is taken from a match between Mishi and Hideaki, two of the three best players in the world at the moment. The score is 2-all to 25. Now, what do you do as red here? Very, very difficult. We could discuss this position alone for 10 minutes, but it should be clear that the answer is not clear. You'd have to have a lot of background experience to get this spot on. So if you apply Wolsey's law, you don't know whether white has a take, and therefore you double. Right? How bad can it be? You're nearly certainly the favourite anyway. So yes, you'll occasionally lose some games because of this, but you will put huge pressure on your opponent. And actually, this is a redouble and only just a take. The game ended in a gammon with a cube on 8. So that was rather exciting. But so Wolsey's law, very, very useful. The second one that's really useful is O'Hagan's law of doubling, where you have 9 out of 36, that's 25% market losing sequences, and the rest of the time you're doing okay. You probably have a double from the middle, so let's look at a practical example. This is a well-balanced position, the race is equal, the positions are approximately equal, but red has a 2-shot against the blot on white's 9 point, and if he hits that blot, he may well win a gammon. So prior to O'Hagan coining this law, lots of people would have waited here, hit the 2, and then redouble or double their opponent out. But actually, it's a big double and a trivial take, obviously, because 25 games, red won't roll a 2. So it's a really, really useful thing, O'Hagan's law. And here's a second example, which most people get wrong as well. Here, red has got a 6-shot. So 17 out of his 36 rolls, win the game outright. The other 19, well, double four's good, double five's good. And he's still in the race and won't be able to accept a redouble. And again, it's a double and a take. And it would be a massive error not to double this, but hundreds of times I've seen positions like this and people don't double. But O'Hagan's law, you've got 17 out of 36. You're way better than 25%. So it's very, very clear that red should double this position. Klaus, so given the same amount of intelligence, timidity will do 1,000 times more damage than audacity. So you need to be aggressive in backgammon. There is no point waiting for the fat lady to sing, come on stage, collect a bouquet and go off again before you double. You need to be aggressive in backgammon. You will put pressure on your opponent and you will generate mistakes, even if you do make a mistake in giving the double. And this is a very useful one from Nick Ballard. I will often redouble what I'm pretty sure is not a redouble on the chance that my opponent will pass. So the higher the cube, the greater the pressure. And your opponent's on the receiving end and he is losing. So there are hundreds of positions that are correct practical redoubles that are not technical redoubles. You know, just so remember that. Apply pressure whenever you can. The last section of this, which I'm going to skip a bit of it because we're probably running a little bit late. So the 7 pillars of wisdom. So I've done a lot of study of backgammon positions and the things that influence your doubling criteria and decision making, and came up with 7 things that I thought were important. So anchors are undervalued when considering a take, and conversely, the lack of an anchor is sometimes ignored with disastrous consequences. Moshi, who's the world #1, spent a fun-packed afternoon here in London with me about 7 years ago, and we spent 3 hours doing anchor and no anchor positions. Now, you know, yes, I will get a life at some point, but it was a fascinating day, and his insights were absolutely splendid. If you've got an irreparably damaged home board, then quite often a double is dropped. Dead checkers are ruinous. So backgammon is a representation of war. If some of your soldiers are off the field of battle, beware. It's probably worse than you think it is, and we'll see that in a minute. Long-term assets, primes, can be very powerful, obviously, hopefully. A broken prime is still very strong. So we'll look at that in a minute. A well-timed backgammon can be lethal. And finally, command of space is more important than you think. These elements are not mutually exclusive. Simple example. So most of the time today, we've been looking at individual positions. I'm going to take you through a game, a real game, and the doubling decisions involved very quickly as it happens. So first position, red's on roll, cube action. He's behind in the race. He's got the better position. He's got the better board. There's nothing that's going to change the world immediately. It's not very volatile. And it's no double take. Okay, no double, just and take. We roll it on, and now white's checkers are all in the inner board except the 2 in red's board, which is a danger sign because now white 6s are going to have to be played off his anchor. As soon as your opponent has got force moves coming up, you should be considering doubling. And this position is indeed a double and a take. So remember that if your opponent has force moves coming up, think about the cube. He didn't double and rolled 5-2. Now he could play 7-2, 7-5 and make the point, but actually, as I said, command of space is important. So you should play 20-18, 20-15 with this 5-2. It leaves 6-5 and 6-6 as great numbers, but that's life. There is always risk associated with every backgammon move. So that's the correct action. And now we move it on another roll, and now white's board has crashed. If he hits a checker, he can't contain it. He's still 18 pips ahead in the race, but it's a false count. And red has gone beyond where he should have doubled. So opportunity missed. And the lesson is you've got to pick precisely the right moment to give your opponent a difficult decision. And you can see this is now a massive pass. Only a true optimist would take this as white. Huge double and huge drop. I'm going to skip the second example. You can do that tomorrow in your own time. But it's positions A, B, and C. All right, it's gone. All right, here we go. Right, so using assets. This position occurred in a game between Paul McGreal and the audience in the Brighton tournament about 20 years ago. The audience doubled and Paul thought that was a premature double. We've since learned a little bit more about backgammon. It's a very early threat, but one thing again I've noticed over the last year and in studying the matches between great players, the cube is coming earlier and earlier. So never be afraid to double. And in fact, this position is only just a take, despite the fact that it's very early on, because red will make his 5 point, he'll have an asset, white's got 4 checkers back to red's 2. So red is going to have a long-term lasting advantage here. And if things go well, he can execute a blitz and win a gammon. So big double and a take. This sort of position occurs frequently. So red's 14 pips behind in the race, but he's got fantastic outer board control and white has a lone rear checker. So warning sign on, no anchor, 7 white checkers on 1 point, on the 6 point, no home board points made. And again, a lot of people will wait until something good happens before they double, but actually you should know that this is only just a take. You should also know how to play the position. So you're going to be hitting with most 4s and 5s on the ace point. You have to know how to play the position. But again, aggression wins you many more points than passivity. So very strong double and a take. And here you can sort of see that red has a long, sorry, I'm having to do these relatively quickly. So again, go over the presentation tomorrow, but red has a solid prime. White has an undeveloped position, but he does have a 33 pip lead in the race, and he might just escape that back checker quite quickly. So it's very volatile. So you would expect this to be a double, which it is, and it's only just a take. So again, you need to look at this yourself and work out what you would have done. I'm not giving you the time to do that, unfortunately, because of the quantity I'm trying to get through. So it's a strong double and a take. This is one I got completely wrong. So again, if you now apply O'Hagan's law to this, you'll find that you should double, because any 10 or 11 hits, double 4, double 6, double 5, sorry, I've counted that already, is good. Not only that, white will have to be very careful coming home and seek to avoid even indirect shots because of the strength of red's board. So I didn't double this, but it's a very clear double. So because red wins a gammon a quarter of the time. So correct action, double take. I've given this to many students, all of whom get it wrong, by the way. So don't worry if you didn't think it was anywhere near a double. And it's only because we have computer analysis that we confirm that double is the correct action here. With any of these positions, if you have time, it's worth just playing them out half a dozen times just to see how they evolve. You may not want to do that, but again, that's another good learning method. So this is the World Championship from 2011, the final, and again, solid position for red. The 4, 5, and 6 points together are called the rack. That's a term that's only been coined this year. And if you have the 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 points, that's called the beast. No one has yet come up with a term for having the 3, 4, 5, and 6 terms. Maybe we'll run a competition on that one. White is in the game for a long time. He has no checkers out of play, but it's going to take him a long time to turn this round. And this is only just a take because red wins so many gammons. So remember the rack. Remember that here that white has a lot of time before he can develop his own position unless he happens to roll double 2, 1, or 3 next time. Beware the lack of an anchor. So here, the race is equal, but white is on the bar. Red, if he rolls as a 3, may well coast home to a gammon. The problem for white is even if he doesn't, red doesn't roll the 3, white has to come in and by that time, red will probably have another checker in position to make the point next time. And this is a pass. So lack of an anchor, I need to reiterate the point. If you don't have an anchor, you really have to evaluate strongly what your winning chances are. This is double and drop. It's very different if you have two checkers back. Let's just go forward again, because if one of your checkers is pointed on, you've got the chance of making an anchor with the second blot. So having two checkers back is normally better than having one checker back, surprisingly enough. And this is only just a double because of the volatility. Okay, so it's an easy take. So you learn, you see these positions repeat, they go into your brain and hopefully you remember them. So you think to yourself, have I got two checkers back? Can I make an anchor? If I can establish an anchor, my winning chances are going to increase. Don't assume you're going to establish an anchor, but it gives you a much better winning chance if there is at least the remote possibility that you might establish an anchor. Broken primes. So this is a broken prime. So red has a broken prime. White sort of has a broken prime, but it's not quite so good. So one of the little facts in Mark Brockman-Olson's book is that white checker on average will take 5.8 rolls to escape from where it is to red's 9 point. So that takes a long time to happen, but he might roll 2-6 next time. Equally well, if red goes off white's anchor, white can attack. So red is the favorite, but he's 16 pips behind in the race, and white has all his checkers in play. So not surprisingly, this is a double and a take. Here's another broken prime position, slightly different this time. I hope you would know that if red rolls something like 5-1, he's going to play 12-7 and 6-5. You're not going to make that point naturally, so you need to slot it. Red is ahead in the race this time, but again, white has all the checkers in play. But you need to double now, because if you make the 5 point, your market has gone. Okay, so it's volatile. There is a broken prime, and you lead in the race, and all of those factors together, position, race, threat, are all slightly in red's advantage, but white has enough chances that he can take. And back games, last but not least, I think. So this is a back game, obviously. White has 1, 2, 3, 4 dead checkers. They are never going to take part in the war. They've left the field of battle. Red has 2s and 3s to hit. And if he hits, white is pretty much toast. And surprisingly enough, when white comes in, he quite often exposes a second checker and he loses a huge number of gammons. So despite the fact that this is only a double shot and red trails by 102 pips, it is a huge pass, right? Because white, one of the things when you take a double is you want to be able to redouble, and white will hardly ever be able to redouble here. So the cube is going to be relatively valueless. Red needs to double to activate gammons because he wins a gammon a third of the time. So I've seen positions like this taken many a time because white says, oh, I'm 102 pips behind, I must have winning chances. But actually you have to try and look ahead as to how the game will pan out. So that's a huge drop. This is very different. So here red has a 5 point prime and he has 1s, 2s and 4s to hit. That's a triple shot. And you might think that white is in more trouble than the previous position, but actually all of white's checkers in play. And normally a triple shot in a back game is either not quite a double or just a double. This one is just a double because white has 2 blots. If there was only 1 blot, it would not be a double and a take, despite red's perfect prime on the other side of the board. So surprising, but that needs to be, you need to think about how the game will evolve again. So it's a trivial take, but this was dropped in the game from which it was taken. So that is a massive error. Finally, a couple of slides on complexity. So this looks like a very powerful position for red. So 52 pip lead deficit, but if he rolls a 5, an 8, or a 10, you'd think he'd pretty much locked up the game. But even if he does that, white will come in a third of the time, and with a 50 pip lead and red having a lot of work to do, surprisingly enough, it's a take. Or again, but this was dropped in the game from which it was taken because white couldn't see a way to win. So red may not make the 3-point. If he does make the 3-point, white may come in on the ace point. You have to have an objective view of the position and try to work out how you're going to win the game when you're doubled. If you can see no route to victory, it's probably a pass. But like Roberti's additional method, look for the chances that you might not spot at first sight. And secondly, it's a reminder that you have to take your time, because you can't just make a snap judgment and say, that looks like a pass, I'm going to pass. Actually, you have to do the work and calculate exactly what you, well, not exactly, but calculate roughly what your winning chances are. But this is a comfortable take. Lastly, I'm going to make reference to the Ultimate Backgammon Championship. This was open only to grandmasters. The final was between Moshi, the world's #1 player, and Hideaki, a 30-year-old Japanese player who's only played for 3 years. It was very strong. So Hideaki, Moshi, and Michi are the 3 strongest players in the world. There were 12 7-point matches. They're all on YouTube. If you search for UBC backgammon, you will find them. Each match takes approximately an hour, and then there is an hour of post-match analysis. And the whole thing is stunning and well worth watching. This position is taken from the final match. Red had been doubled, and Moshi redoubled to 4. Now, again, you can use a little bit of O'Hagan. You could use certainly a little bit of Woolsey here. I'm not sure it's a take, so I would be shipping the cue. Moshi doubles, Hideaki fought for a few minutes, came up with the right answer. It is a redouble and it is a take. Again, a lot of players would not redouble because they would be worried about white entering with a 4 and then escaping and or hitting a red checker. But with a 5-point board, it takes time to come in, and you win a lot of gammons when your opponent doesn't come in or you close out the 4-point. So then I thought, well, let's change the position and take the 3 checkers on the 3-point, red's 3-point, and move them to the 4-point. So then we get this position. So it's only 3 pips different. Would the answer be the same? So now if white comes in with a 3, he needs at least a 4 to escape. So that's one relevant point. And the checker that was dead on the 3-point is now live on the 4-point. So you would expect that to make a change in red's favor, but would you expect a change of 0.332 in terms of equity? So now his gammon percentage has gone up. So in the preceding version, let's just go back, he won a gammon about 30% of the time, 35%. Here he wins a gammon 50% of the time. That is a massive, massive difference. So this position was discussed in the post-match analysis. So huge pass now, massive pass. So, and then 2 last positions and we're done. Many factors. So what do you do here? So red needs to escape a checker from behind a 5', but he's got 2 checkers on the bar, could close out 4 checkers. So definitely time to apply Woolsey's law, definitely time to apply O'Hagan's law, and come up with the answer redouble and take. And you just cannot calculate that. Only the very best players would get positions like this right consistently. You'd have to have seen something like this before to even make a valid judgment. Redouble and take. This is my own surprise position. So this is myself against Moshi, Cyprus 2019. So Moshi had doubled me early. It's a match to 9, I think, but the score's not relevant. I've got 6s to hit, 8s to hit, 1s to hit, and 4s to anchor. And I'm 8 pips ahead in the race. So to me, this was a no-brainer. And I redoubled. There were approximately 25 to 30 people watching. Moshi took 4.5 minutes and then took the cue. which surprised all 25 players plus me. And it's not even a redouble. And then we have to go and work out why all of that was, and I'm not going into an in-depth analysis, but Moshi's ability to analyze this position correctly was astounding. That anchor on the 4-point gives him long-term equity. I don't always roll one of the numbers that hits. It was an eye-opener for me, this one. And last but not least, to make sure even the best players in the world make mistakes, this is Moshi against Michi, and I can't remember who was red. Red doubled, white passed. It's actually no double. So even the very best players in the world make horrendous mistakes. We will all continue to make horrendous mistakes, very sad. That's just one of those things. You will make errors on a consistent basis throughout your backgammon life. The idea is to make them small errors. So just repeating the 7 pillars of wisdom. There you go. They're not mutually exclusive. Next steps, make sure you know the basics, learn Ward and Trice's formulae, analyze your own games. So every game I play, I analyze afterwards, and I will not play another one before I've analyzed the preceding one. It's my own rule. Use structured study. So take a position, roll it out, then change it, then roll it out again, which is basically what the Wolsey Encyclopedia and Mark Olson's book do. Remember to be aggressive. Doubling is really very difficult. And last word is a single word. So Alex Ferguson, before Manchester United players played every football match, as each player left the dressing room, Alex Ferguson would take each player and utter one word in his ear before he went out on the pitch. And that was the word. You cannot play this game with half your mind somewhere else. It takes a great deal of concentration and effort to play good backgammon. I hope I haven't scared you during the course of the evening. This is all the stuff that will be handed out tomorrow. And finally, of course, if you're talking about doubling, you know you've made mainstream when it's in a Peanuts cartoon. So there you go. Any questions? We stop sharing. Hang on. No, unmute yourself. No, I'm trying to unmute you. Right. Okay. Feel free to unmute yourself. Ask anything you like.
Thank you very much indeed.
Yeah. So I hope it wasn't too damning or mind-boggling. It's a difficult topic, and I may well produce a book based on this presentation, but with rather more detail and a rather slower pace, obviously. Yeah.
Right.
Brilliant. If I didn't want my mind boggled, I wouldn't play backgammon. So
Yeah, that's how it goes.
thank you very much.
I don't see anything in the chat. No, we're all good. Oh,
Thank you. The 7 pillars of wisdom.
yes, yes.
Chris,
Sadly, all of my knowledge is about backgammon, with a little bit about IT. Yeah.
okay. Thank you very much. Anyway,
You need a double now.
Mm.
Time for brandy.
Double
A double
spot.
drink, yeah, not a double.
Yeah, okay.
Thanks, Chris.
All
Thank
right.
you very much.
So,
Thank you very
I
much.
will send out,
Good question.
I'll
Thank
send
you.
out the
Good
link
evening.
at some point. Oh, I need to stop recording or else we'll get all this rubbish. Hang on. Stop.